I'd like to start out first about it for a long time. I've been here with Greg involved for a long time. Greg is one of the people who's most committed to scholarship and research I've ever met. He's also someone who, if there's a person who's harmed here, he is likely to be among the people who's going to set it right. And I have experience involved in this way. And actually, I have experience with Dan Ritchie in this way. And I will just say about the central administration of this school that it is a pleasure to be here and an honor to be here and an honor to speak for those because of these people all. And I want to thank you. I want to begin from Barack Obama, second in the world. It was a marvelous president. He talked about the words of the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal. And endowed by their freedom and asserted the equal rights that among these are life, liberty, and pursue happiness. Now, the Declaration was written by the slave owner Thomas Jefferson, who was a miserable slave. For any of you who've seen Django, Candyland and Monticello are more similar than they are. That is something that could not be shown in an American movie until the white guy, Tarantino, made this slightly comic, sarcastic, shoot 'em up by a liberated slave bounty hunter framed by a German bounty hunter movie. The things I'm going to talk about today are, on the one hand, we have a vision of a better America, which Barack represented, and represented in words which are unusual. And I'm not a big fan of the American presidents. It happens that I read the book written to my father. I lived in Pakistan when I was a kid, and that's why I lived in the movie. I mean, that's I'm black. But, you know, who he is makes an enormous, who he found himself to be makes an enormous amount of sense. And I admire him. And the speech said that we are continuing what our forebears did at Seneca Falls in 1848. The full name with it. At Selma and at Stony. And he made it clear that this is a society in which patriarchy is no longer on. And by the way, since you're in a professional school, I had a nonviolence class last year, and it was completely charming. And there were 10 women and 3 guys counting. And actually, that's not terribly atypical. There's been an enormous change in higher education. And it really is moving towards a long way from yet, but it is moving towards state in which what he said is a real thing. The speech had an enormous effect. Right now, the Boy Scouts is about to become a joke and a discriminatory organization that's actually racially. And I was invited this morning to comment on a comment list which had 2,000 comments of people writing favorable to this change, praising the Boy Scouts for having come around. And there was one person who said, this is the damnation of America. Right? Everybody else was just trouble. So I'm afraid the damnation of America proved. He's not getting his money from voters anymore. There's an earlier phase to this. And it's a phase about which there's still a lack. It's not an entire lack, it's a real lack. I was on a radio show with Dr. Betts on KTNU on 150th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, tree-wide, and none of us learned about the Emancipation Proclamation read when we were young. And I saw William Lincoln one of the things which is striking about it is that Lincoln connects the 14th Amendment to that which makes the Constitution clean, which the Supreme Court will not overthrow, which rids the Constitution of slavery. So that's enormously important. And there's been quite a lot, for example, in the New York Times, of discussion of these things, going back to, there were a couple of reviews of a rather silly book by a guy named John Meacham, a bestseller on Thomas Jefferson, designed for local cocktail party conversation. He says the issue of slavery, Monticello discussed it, it's in the Actors. So I wrote an op-ed piece in which, at the end of the first paragraph, I just asked the question, or I just said, you want to find out how much of an accuracy it is, ask the descendants of Sally Hemings for this in that. But it's not sharper. There's a limitation of what the Congress will cover. My book, Black Age Symbols, Fighting for Emancipation of the World Descendants, I gave the University lecture on in 1999. I figured out I used it by 1999. I went to many research libraries, and I tried to get this book published. It's hard to crack the history. And American Revolution is the dollar signs of history built up, you know. And historians are devoted to not talking about blacks in the Revolution because, as Gary mentioned, one of the historians was the dirty secret of the American Revolution is that Governor Dunmore of Virginia proclaimed starting in 1772, you proud colonists, you go to rebel, I will free all the slaves in indentured service, I will sow destruction wherever I can reach, and I will raise all your mansions to the ground. And he said this in 1772, he issued a proclamation in November of 1775. And Virginia and everywhere south rebelled to keep slavery. It was a precursor of parallel to the Civil War. And it's not clear how many blacks came from the British side, but I refined the estimates they had. But it's somewhere between 40 and 60,000 out of 400,000 slaves from the British side in chief reason. And the British, not surprisingly, depended for redcoats on blacks to do all the work in the fight. And furthermore, they had guerrilla war led by the fellow Captain Todd in New Jersey and in South Carolina. And so, if the British had persisted on pursuing this, the American Revolution would have freed blacks throughout the country and recruited them. The war was sunk by the sun. Fortunately, the American side went on for history. The British were sufficiently racist so that although there was tremendous competition to recruit blacks and free them going on, they didn't free everybody. But I told another story, and the book was the #1 book that Chicago put out in history. They told me that the books always got a review with the New York Times. And I've gotten a wonderful reception of the book, but it hasn't gotten a review with the New York Times. I haven't gotten a letter to the New York Times mentioning the one, which is interesting. So, what I found is the following. There was an international rebellion against slavery starting in Jamaica in the Caribbean in 1750, and there were 20 slave laws. And the sailors had all been picked off the streets by the British. It was called, they were press, it was press gangs. And if you didn't fall off the mast when they had you climb up, go down and become sharp, then you survived as the slave of the British while you were in the Navy. So, free or slave, black or white, you were a sailor. When the slaves revolted, you identified with the slaves. So they came to London in 1760, and there's a fellow who starts enterprise, initially J. Fillmore, and he wrote 2 dialogues concerning the man. And he talked about how evil the trade in human beings was. And it was a beautiful picture. And they came to Boston. And in 1764, James Otis, one of the great heroes of the American Revolution, was wounded in a duel and died. And his less celebrated because he actually says something really significant in the rights of the British colonists asserted and approved in 1764. What he says is every man has natural rights to black and also. This was discussed in every tavern where sailors and artisans went. Blacks, free and slave, and whites often hung out together, particularly in New York. And one of the things about the agitation of the American Revolution is a little bit like in 2004, at the Democratic Convention, there were a lot of folks who were against the war in Iraq. But Teresa Hines Carey was speaking that he invented and coding a full amount of U.S. got out of Iraq, and she swore out the rest of it, and then carried out the U.S. And if you scratch Carey, what I guess is he was concerned about Iraq. Those were successful. But of course, the New York Times and everybody else reported that as the Democratic Party was formed before the war in Iraq. Well, they weren't allowed. Whatever. I think actually that all people involved in the Tea Party probably didn't get the revolution. There were two big riots in the run-up to the revolution against Westchester. It was a big feature of the American Revolution. I have it in my book. It has become much sharper as it's going around the world. So one of the things about this is that the American Revolution itself was fused with the revolution from below for emancipation. And this force, which also included Christians who spoke out against it, as the preacher Samuel Hopkins of New Life Protestantism in Providence, Rhode Island, he said, this is a skin of crimson dye. And people used to know what that meant. So, it wasn't like Jerry Falwell saying odd things. So what it meant was every time they lost to the British, God was punishing America for practicing slavery. And in 1780, Pennsylvania had gradual emancipation of slaves. In 1782, the Boston Supreme Court declared emancipation of slaves. In 1784, Rhode Island and Connecticut freed the slaves. In 1799, New York, the biggest slave-holding colony, freed slaves. At least as big as South Carolina. And in 1804, New Jersey. So actually, my book tells the story of how this great, honorable international revolution for abolition was part of the American Revolution and led to the greatest achievement of freedom, gradual emancipation of northern states. Because, we all say, and Barack said it very well, the American Revolution is a revolution for equal freedom. And its greatest accomplishment was the freeing of every man, black as well as white, finally in the northern states. Took a while back in these days. By 1840, black slavery was released in New York. So I thought, gee whiz, New York Times covered this. I got the patriotic story. I got the antidote for everything, and so on. But it turns out that many historians are very cautious about this. Others love this. National. But there are a bunch of people who aren't so happy with this caution. And the basic caution is this, and this is the caution of the New York Times. It's all right to say Christmas addicts stood up for the British and was massacred in 1770 Boston Massacre. It's 1673. It's all right to say that there are 5 Christmas addicts. It's not all right to say this was a central issue of the American Revolution. How simple was it? There's a German private named George Daniel Flor in Rhode Island. He worked with the French World War with patriots. And he walked around the field by the back. And he wrote in his diary, most of the dead lying around the field on both sides were mauled Moors. Most of the dead at the crucial battle in the American Revolution were black. You mean if you're a patriot, you got to be opposite of the AR? You got to say, well, we ought to be founding this right the descendants of black troops, right? Not excluding, were the sons of the American Revolution I get letters from people about an incredibly difficult time getting into the sons of the American Revolution, or the daughters of the American Revolution. There's just a chapter this summer formed in Queens of the daughters of the American Revolution by two black senators. And there were 11 people happy to apply to this, and they figured they should stand up. But the fact is that the DAR was with it, and not a silly racist organization. These are people who should be most honored. It has just been discovered in Bruce Levini's book, The Fall of the House of Dixie, that 8% of the recruits to the Union Army after the Emancipation Proclamation, 8% black. If you want to know why Lincoln won and why the South, those who fought for slavery, and all the tales about Dixie, Tarantino has this right. And actually, I read a review that said Tarantino distorted what they did. I'll tell you, I've studied slavery quite a lot, and actually, what he did is a fragment of what slavery did. So, one of the things about this is that if you were to carry out the theme of where I speak, this would be part of it. But even here, there's a long way to shine a light on this. Now, I want to talk briefly about two other things which are very similar, which I call founding myths or founding amnesia. One is that I was invited by Vincent Harding to go on a trip to Palestine, and as a Jew, I knew that what I would find would be difficult for me to take. But I went, and for 2 weeks I went around. And there were two standards there, because as with the American settlers, the Israeli settlers settled a land without people. For people without land, except there were people. And they wrote land. And the UN has just pointed out again that the occupation of the further Palestinian territories is illegal at all settlers after that. And Israel is, of course, rejecting that, but it's rejecting international law, and it's rejecting many things that have been established, among other things, to protect the Jews who were victimized in the war. I talk about that like so I went there, and I can't just say very briefly, so I can talk about it a little bit once I start. If you are a Jewish settler's child and you throw a bucket of shit or urine down a bazaar and take the pepper off the rocks, they busted up the bazaar pepper. The Israeli Defense Forces will not arrest you if they get that. But if you were to be arrested, you would go to a civilian court, you would have habeas corpus, and you would be brought before a judge and death. Normal procedural rules. If you were Palestinian engaged in nonviolent demonstrations in villages against the wall, cutting off the olive trees on which your life was passed, and you get shot up, the 17 or 16-year-olds there go home and they sleep at night, and the Israeli army comes in and routs them and takes the wall, and they are held in military confinement for 8 days and torture. And then they have to be brought before a judge, and they're only kept in jail for 4 months after that. And there are people very good involved in Kenya. I met them. So I saw the young Israelis with their guns who attacked these demonstrations. And it's the saddest thing. It's not much publicized here. There was no one on my trip. This was a trip led by civil rights leaders, Vincent Harding and all that time. Every one of them. Vincent, for example, knew Mickey Shorter, who was murdered with my Walden School classmate, who lived in Philadelphia, Mississippi, along with him. And he knew of him, and he had been fostered by Jewish teachers, and he spoke of the pain that was involved for him in seeing the apartheid or Jim Crow arrangements. And I'll tell you, there was one of them who had to go 2 hours on the trip. had the slightest doubt about that. And if you were talking about it, of course, the myth here, right, is Israel is the small Arab democracy fighting the great sea of angry Arab powers, tremendously in danger, and so we must arm its enemy, and we must not enforce human rights. The human rights of Israelis depend on the security of Israelis, all Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis depend on treating Palestinians decently, as they're having influence. Palestinians are not Arabs, they're a particular people. The way Palestinians are treated in Jordan is a scandal. So I want to say, the founding myth here, which is just like the founding myth of George Washington, founding Fellowship for Freedom. No, our constitutional document doesn't license slavery. It's not like, we'll read it. It's for freedom. It is for freedom in part. The Bill of Rights is one. And the fact is, the slaves are treated as the man who like their masters. And for 52 of the first 72 years of the American Republic, the president was a slave owner, and the only president elected twice was slavery. So, the third thing I want to talk about, and this is not a conclusion. The state capitol that has a series of monuments which defend the slaughter of Native Americans driving them. The worst thing they defend is the Sand Creek Massacre, which is listed in front of the State House as a battle of the Sand Creek Palace. And Colonel Chinnington is right up there, along with Colonel Shoup, who were doing this. And Governor Evans, who helped raise 100 Native militia, which was long condemned, which went out to kill the Red Keys, the phrase Red Keys, letter of Chinnington in 1880, and he was reflecting on his afterwards. And so, that's why I said, I have a first hand on something. Because of a lot of this stuff, there are a lot of stories. And so, actually going through the documents and reading them and thinking. We have to try to Professor Al-Qaeda Security, the history department, spent 15 years going about it, and in our archives, they have 8 boxes. And I've gone through about 2/3 of them now, so I have a much better idea than I did before. All around the State House, there's one really good thing. There's a monument to Governor Ralph Carr, who defended civil rights of Japanese Americans who were in concentration camps. He was the only governor at the time who spoke out for the Constitution, and he stood up for Roosevelt in the Open War in California. And now we're getting the judiciary building. And this could not be more honorable. It does show that about some things we remember, and some things we don't. But about these Native Americans, it's how it was in India. Oh, I'm sorry, what this is this? There are about 10 or 20 Indian weapons, Indian Native weapons, probably West Coast, Falls Island, and you can that here. When the settlers got it, and they're now less than that. And the process is that the settlers displaced them, drove them out. And the Native Americans, mostly were very smart, and they realized that the U.S. government was going to kill them if they fought. Save more time, and they tried to peace agreements. The U.S. government broke just about every agreement, and they chased people out and out and out and out and out. So, I've written a little bit about it before. I hope we've written about it. So, we'll look into it. We found a lot of other people who have. And I just got a letter this morning from Don Hughes, who's a fellow editor professor. Some of the other professors, Sarah Nelson, of course, like knows all about Sand Creek and words about, what does it mean to be a vegetable or not evidence, professorship, study African languages, and so on, and how we're going to create a society with all of the sentences. Because Rock really spoke all about gays, but somehow, once he's often spoken about including Native Americans, but actually, I don't think it's, up there. It's there, but it's not the forefront. And the truth is that this is an undoubted thing. And if you think about how we got ourselves into a crazy war with non-white people in Iraq, like we had 5 years since I've had anybody who would defend. any of the business rules in this way they are. You know, it's not any basis for them to have any aggression. It's crazy folks who went to football and call Americans. Barack, today, Chuck Hagel, he's a great person, the Secretary of Defense. He was moving to Vietnam and war. He supported it for a long time afterwards. He was dismayed with the things that Lyndon Johnson said. Well, I can't get out because you don't like it. You know, Winston, of course, what I said. He didn't think it was worth having the war. Yeah. So he's exactly the kind of person where we have to have. But he's a patriot. He has form. He has unity. And he's willing to consider whether we should do stupid, crusading aggressions, which, by the way, have accomplishments. So it's really quite a thing for one not 8 inches, but out of the way. I think that this issue of whether we can take in who we are as people in an all-encompassing way, in which everyone's welcome, from every background, every adult who obeys the law will be honored here and has freedom of conscience and is not abused and not murdered. That is the task which Obama promised us in his second inaugural. And I think we've seen some things already emanating from this, which are good. And there's a lot of stuff about how bad things are in Washington, but I know it's very good in Washington, so I have a low picture. So I actually, and I don't think this is declaration, but I think that the theme of this meeting, which is that we are a country which hopes for equal rights. And these are not self-executing. And racism, sexism, homophobia, and many other things that we are. The fact is that we have made some progress. And the fact is that we collectively have made some progress. And I feel especially honored by our to be asked to speak here because I feel that this school is there. And I'm really happy about the it makes a difference to me. Say over this is a place which is very good, and each of us can do what we can to really live up to this. So, thank you. So I'll take questions. This is one thing. The bookstore has some of my books, and if anybody wants to get one, they actually sell it at a not totally unreasonable price, $30. If you contact me, I will meet with you and talk about it on the side of the book. All right. So, thank you. Yes.